You're on
My
a roll.
work here is done.
Shouldn't have oiled your wall, Joe.
I love it.
YouTuber, like, what just happened?
Welcome to another American Sci-Fi Classics Track quarantine panel. It's Thursday night, and I understand that there is a Dune movie that came out tonight that some people are watching. And for those people, I would like to remind you that, there's more showing. And also, this thing that we're recording now, you can also watch it later. So really, nobody is missing anything. Everything's going to be okay, you guys. But in the meantime, it's spooky season, and tonight we are doing one of our favorite things, movie novelization readings. And to do that, I got to have people who are able to read. I found 3 of them, and here they are. One internet south of me, Michael Williams. Introduce yourself. Tell people who you are and such.
You have to take yourself off mute, Mike.
Probably should. I muted myself because somebody is echoing, so I unmuted myself. But I write horror, urban fantasy, science fiction. I won the Manly Wade Wellman Award in 2020 for my novel A Fallen Autumn, and I resisted making the joke that you had to go outside Alabama to find 3 literate people. So I'm really proud of myself. See how proud of myself I am.
I approve.
And you can find me at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com.
And one internet diagonally from me, Toni Ann.
Howdy, or something. So I didn't know that you had to be able to read to be on this panel. So now I'm having second thoughts. No, I'm just kidding. So hi everyone. I am a computer science professor by day, and I blog about Star Trek at night because I am watching it for the first time ever. I am midway through Enterprise, and there are lyrics, and that's weird.
Those lyrics are wonderful. And
wonderful is not the first word that comes to mind.
You are correct. But as I was saying, let's introduce the other guy.
Do we have to?
One internet to the left of me, Keith. Welcome.
Hi. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, and not only can I read, I can also occasionally write, and sometimes even write skillfully, although there's arguments on that subject. And among the many things I have written over the course of a 27-year career, writing fiction includes writing several movie novelizations, including Serenity, Darkness Falls, the first 3 Resident Evil films, a couple of Buffy the Vampire Slayer episodes, plus 2 movie novelizations that were never published. But I wrote them anyway. And they
can't forget Gargantua.
And I actually had forgotten Gargantua. Thank you. Yes, and also Gargantua, the 1998 Fox TV movie starring Adam Baldwin as a marine biologist, which tells you everything you need to know about the movie right there.
Yeah. So what we started doing this last year. We've done this a few times. This time, because it's spooky season, we are narrowing the focus of the movie novelization readings to horror stuff. And unless anybody wants to go first, here is choked up already. Here is my selection, and it is Fangface, a time machine trip on a pirate ship. So if anybody wants, I'm going to go ahead and do it. You guys just hang out. All right, here we go. And this is not something I found like one might do on the interwebs. This is a book that I bought for my own self when I was 7 years old. Wait, no, I was 10. Okay, never mind. 10. Oh, and guys, check this out. I colored the pages. Boom.
You are such a nerd.
That is entirely too precious because now I have like 10-year-old Joe in my head with his like little coloring pencils. Oh,
Yeah.
That's adorable.
It is. It is.
That's amazing.
Okay. Let's see here. All right. I got to get to... Oh, okay. Here we go. Let's see. What? Ghost ship? What's happening? I'm just going to jump. We're jumping in the middle of a scene. Kim shuddered and said, "Did you see that? Iron Mask has superpowers." "That's right," Biff answered. "And that's why we need our super werewolves to stop him." Still in the barrel, Biff reached into his pocket. He pulled out a postcard with a picture of the moon on it, sidebar, because apparently that works. That counts as moonlight. I don't know. "I'll show this to our secret weapons," Biff said, as he placed the picture so that Fangs and Baby Fangs could see it. Whenever Sherman Fangsworth and Baby Fangs see a picture of the moon, they become kooky, crazy werewolves. And I didn't make that up. Look. Kooky, crazy werewolves. Suddenly, the Fang's barrel began to spin wildly. It twirled around as crazy howls filled the air. Then out from the barrel burst Fangface and, I'm not making this up, Fangpuss. "Go get that creep, Fangface," Biff yelled. Fangface and Fangpuss grabbed Pugsy's barrel and began shaking it. Pugsy was bouncing around in his barrel like a jumping bean. "Not me, you nitwits! Get the creep with the iron face." Fangface stopped shaking the barrel. Oh, sorry, Pugs. Come on, Fangpuss. We got the wrong creep." Suddenly, Iron Mask and Bruno appeared on the deck. "Intruders! Go get them, Bruno!" Bruno grabbed a large fishing net, and the werewolf scooted away from Bruno and ran up to Iron Mask. "Okay, Iron Puss," snarled Fangface. "Give up, or we'll huff and we'll puff and we'll blow your mask down." And scene. Thank you.
Wow. I'm just going to say that this gives me inspiration. One day when I am emperor, I will unleash chaos upon the masses by mailing every person in my realm a postcard, straight out of comments on this stream, a postcard with a picture of the moon. And then all the werewolves will uncontrollably get turned into werewolves. I'll do it at the new moon just to mess with people. And then there's going to be no end to the screaming, and it'll be amazing. And that's one of my campaign promises.
Well, I would certainly vote for you for emperor, just based on that.
I'm just excited that the crazy kooky werewolves crazily howled at the moon and there was lots of crazy shenanigans. Like, can you fit the word crazy 7 more times in that paragraph?
Yes.
Possibly.
And later on in chapter 23, because, there's 23 chapters. Later on, Fangface eats one of his partners, eats one of the gang. He eats him, and okay, well, I've said too much. Spoilers, I apologize. Okay, let's see. Reverse alphabetically by last name. Michael would be first.
Woo!
Because it's science.
Science!
Yes.
But now I understand why 10-year-old Joe turned out to be the Joe that we see today. Like that.
Yelp. His entire childhood has just been explained.
Yeah, and I didn't need to go to counseling school for that. Like, this is
Easy.
it's easy.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Open book. I'm an open book, and that book is Fangface, a time machine trip to the pirate ship.
I originally thought we would be reading science fiction movie novelizations, and so I pulled out something that I procured earlier this year for the low price of like $2 on eBay after realizing that the novelization of Independence Day had been written by Dean Devlin, who created the show Leverage, which I love. But
Dean Devlin did not create Leverage.
Hmm?
He didn't create Leverage. He produces it, but he didn't create it.
Okay. Yeah. He's the person who's currently the face of Leverage.
Yes.
How's that? Does that satisfy your terms?
Yes.
So instead, I said to my husband, well, I don't have any horror movie novelizations. And he said, oh, yeah, we do. We've got The Cabin in the Woods.
No way.
He used to work for a newspaper that received books that were novelizations of movies in hopes that they would get reviewed. And this is one of the books that wound up in his possession.
Me too.
Well, husband to save the day.
Yeah, totally. So there's somebody in comments who likes Dean Devlin too. Thank you. And so I started reading it, and it's a weird read because like all the character bits are way less good in the movie. All the parts where the characters are just like talking to each other, you just keep finding yourself thinking, am I supposed to like these people? Was I supposed to want to see them survive this horror movie? And it's weird, and it's like leans really hard in on like dirty sex fiend teenagers. It's really weird in a gross way, you know? Like to the point that the guy in the movie who's the like likable jock who's actually really smart, who's been set up on a date kind of with the friend of the other person. In the movie, they have this like really sweet little sort of like getting to know each other. And in the book, the first thing he thinks when he looks at her is, well, she's pretty, but not too pretty, and that's good. And I really want to, I'll say, frill her, but I also want to get to know her, and that has literally never happened in my life. I am confused. And it's really gross and weird. And so like all the character interplay stuff in the book is not good. But the horror bits in the book are great. Like they're amazing. It's just stunning that like it's like two different people wrote it and one person did not want his name on it. So I don't know what's going on there, but it's really, really fascinating. So I'm going to jump into a scene which, if you've seen the movie, will be familiar to you. And if you have not seen the movie, will not massively spoil anything. And if you have not seen the movie, then I strongly urge you to do so. If you like horror. And if you don't like horror, then what the hell are you doing here?
Seriously.
So, this was the last thing she wanted to do, but there was no way she was going to lose. It wasn't bravado or even a desire to impress Holden. It was what Kurt had said. He'd made her out to be a whining wimp, and she wasn't that at all. Not as wild as Jules, perhaps. Not as daring. But once dared, she had no alternative. So she went down there, but even as she did so, she wondered in the back of her mind if she should have simply refused and nailed the hatch shut. Dana, Marty said as she stepped down onto the first tread. He plucked a small flashlight from above the kitchen sink and handed it to her. She switched it on and discovered that the light was weak and puny, so she wiped the front clear. That made no difference. The batteries must have been low, so she decided to turn it off until she really needed it. Yawn, Kurt said, and Dana didn't even grace him with a look. What the hell was wrong with that dick? Too much beer, maybe, or maybe back in the shower. Jules hadn't been quite so accommodating as they'd all assumed. See, this part is like really clunky and anyway. The second tread creaked loudly, and the third, the creaks providing background to her journey down. The smell closed around her, and the heavy, warm atmosphere, heated perhaps by pipes passing beneath the floorboards to this cabin's various rooms. She gasped, and the warm air she tasted reminded her of stale, wet dog. She turned the torch on, but it was barely effective, the light serving more to deepen the darkness further around it than to illuminate close by. How long do I have to stay down here? She called. Oh, you know, just till morning, Kurt said, and she cursed him silently. Prick. Later, she decided she'd ask Jules what was wrong with him all of a sudden. She only hoped her friend knew. Half a dozen more creaking stairs, and then she was at the bottom, standing on a rough, packed soil floor that was covered in dust and grit. Shining the light around, she caught vague glimpses of shapes in the darkness, inanimate shadows, each of which seemed to possess a hulking, waiting stance. Even squinting, she could not make out much. An old shelving unit, vague objects bundled here and there, a bookshelf leaning with damp, its shelves stacked with books whose titles had long since worn away, the flared mouth of an old gramophone. She could see nothing more, yet she had a feeling there was plenty down there. She sensed the size of the room, yet even her breathing was dampened by the contents piled within. So she moved away from the staircase and into the darkness, the torch her only companion. Away from the stairs, the complete darkness gave the flashlight more power. Its beam penetrated further, and soon Dana confirmed just how packed this basement was and how random its contents seemed to be. The light glinted from metal tools stacked against the wall and hanging from hooks along its length. Most were rusted, bright metal showing only here and there, and some of them seemed to be broken. She made out the gramophone in more detail, an old wind-up device that would likely fetch a decent price at an antique market. How quaint. Beside it was a landslide of old musical instrument cases, some closed, most open to reveal their barren insides. Scattered across the pile like snowdrifts on a hillside, heaps of sheet music lay in silence. Moving to the left, Dana's heart leapt as the light fell across a humanoid shape standing behind a layer of thin, dusty net curtains. She held her breath and was about to flee when she saw that the shape had no head. She exhaled slowly and advanced, sweeping the hanging curtain aside. It was as light as a spider's web. Beyond, the decapitated dressmaker's mannequin stood propped against a table, one of its feet broken off as well. It wore a half-stitched dress, a lace affair that might once have been beautiful, but which now was browned by damp and time. Dana wondered whom the dress had been intended for and how many times they had tried it on, standing motionless while a dressmaker pinned and folded, measured and cut. Whoever it had been, she guessed they were long dead now. On the table beside the mannequin were several china dolls, their faces mostly broken and cracked. She found them more sad than troubling. Children had once played with these things, and now, like the dress's vanished owner, they were gone, leaving only their broken toys behind. Dana? Hey, Dana. She moved further around the room, ignoring the soft calls from Jules. The cabin above was a different world now, a long distance in time and space from this trove of old treasures. Though disturbed, Dana also found herself entranced by this collection of a life's leftovers. There was a toy chest with toys spilled around its base, including wooden animals, spinning tops, musical instruments, and gaily painted puppets. One corner seemed to be taken with a circus act's equipment, and Roberto, the limbless man, stared out at her from a billboard and several posters. Circus games, their origins and uses lost to memory, stood either side of Roberto's posters, beautifully built, their garish colors fading down in the basement. Bookshelves, furniture, hat boxes, mirrors, paintings, lamps, sculptured animals in wood and metal, a rack of movie reels. And then the torch passed across a ghostly face staring right at her. Dana screamed and dropped the torch, scrabbling to snatch it up again and backing against a wardrobe, its corner and joints soft and weakened by decay. Something fell inside the wardrobe. It sounded wet, and she slid away, torch and attention still fixed on the face. Those eyes so probing, so harsh, so knowing. Dana? Holden called from above. Footsteps rang on the stairs and timber creaked, and it sounded as if his voice and steps were coming in from a great distance, not just 20 feet away. Even as she realized that the glaring face was a portrait, she was willing Holden to her and hoping he would make the journey in safety. Weird idea, she thought, and then Holden was by her side, holding her arm and looking at the portrait as well. It was actually a daguerreotype, she saw, of a young woman, maybe 15 years old. Her clothes were turn of the century, and she stared with a grimness that typified portraiture of the time. You okay? Holden asked. More clattering and creaking, and the others arrived behind him, even Kurt looking concerned. Changed his tune, she thought. Yeah, sorry, I just scared myself. It was stupid. You called for help, Kurt said. That voids the dare. Take your top off. Marty, it's like so weird and gross when it's like that. Anyway, I don't know. It's also very straight. So Marty struck a match and lit an old oil lantern hanging on the wall, adjusting it so that the flame burned bright. It smoked for the first few seconds, burning off oil that had been coagulating for years, and then the orange light diffused through the room. The others all gasped, and Dana caught her breath. "It's even more amazing than I thought." "Oh my God," Holden murmured. The basement occupied at least the floor area of the cabin above, perhaps more, and every dark corner seemed to be filled with creepy clutter. "Look at all this," Jules said, and she was the first to slowly start examining the piles of stuff. Guys," Marty said, "I'm not sure it's awesome to be down here." He stood at the bottom of the staircase, the oil lamp back on the hook beside him, and he looked as if he'd be darting back upstairs at the slightest provocation. But the others weren't paying any attention. Jules and Kurt were off on their own, each focusing on different parts of the basement, and Holden still stood beside Dana, peering around in wonder. He took a step and picked up an ornate music box from the pile of children's toys. Removing his glasses from his pocket and slipping them on, he turned the box this way and that before pausing, seemingly holding his breath. "Dude, seriously, your cousin's into some weird shit." Kurt was across the basement holding a conch shell in his hands, turning it this way and that, and he brought it halfway to his ear. "You can hear the sea if you press an old shell to your ear," before changing his mind and quickly putting it back down. He picked up a melon-sized wooden sphere that lay behind it. It was inlaid with dusty brass rings and lined with angular joints, and he turned it in his hands as if trying to find a way in. "Pretty sure this ain't his," he said. "Maybe the people who put in that window." Dana couldn't take her eyes off the portrait of the girl. It was propped on a hardwood stand, and a black sheet hung over the portrait's frame, as if it had once been concealed from view. On the small vanity table that stood before it was a variety of personal effects, an old hairbrush, a silver mirror, and a leather-bound book. "Some of this stuff looks really old," she said. "Look at this," Jules said. She had moved across to the dressmaker's mannequin, less spooky in the lamplight, but still strange with the unfinished garment still tight upon it. She touched something hanging around its neck, an amulet, and as she held it in her hand, she said, "It's beautiful." "Maybe we should go back upstairs," Marty said. He was still standing at the bottom of the staircase, looking around nervously, hands clasped in front of him. He's actually scared, Dana thought, and the idea disturbed her. When no one answered him, he said, "I dare you all to go upstairs?" And then Marty froze, and a small smile crept through his fear. "Oh, wow, take a look at this," he said, and he walked a few steps to where a bunch of old film reels were stacked. Beneath them was a Super 8 projector, and piled beside it in several small suitcase-style containers that Dana thought might contain more reels. The plinth they stood on was circular and built up of regular stones, its tabletop a board of thick, roughly cut wood. It looked like an old capped well. Dana frowned, wondering what a well was doing in the basement of a house, or rather why a cabin would be built around a well. Marty plucked a reel from its rack and started examining it. "Porn?" Kurt asked, but Marty didn't reply. He started unspooling it, holding the film up to the light and moving it slowly through his hand, mouth open in wonder. "What is it, Marty?" Dana asked, but whatever story was playing before his eyes, it seemed to hold him entranced and distant from them. So Dana turned and approached the portrait, staring into the girl's eyes and trying to blink back the certainty that they stared back. Perhaps it was something to do with the way the portrait had been framed, the material behind it, or the manner in which it had been slightly faded by the basement air, but the girl's eyes seemed so alive. There we go.
Wow.
I love, the horror parts of this book are great. The scene where they, stop at the gas station at the very beginning. It's an amazingly written scene. And, everything before it on its way to that and everything after it is, the clumsiest, weirdest stuff. It's so weird. I don't know. Clearly, the person who wrote this book understands monsters and not people. And for that, I salute them.
Oh, yeah. It was written by Tim Levin, who's a really good horror writer.
Yeah.
Well, that it's a weird thing when because you want to think that novelizations and movies are I think just we link them in our brains because we think somehow they all work together, like they're all sitting there writing the things in a little apartment together. Hey, do you want more pizza? No, I've got to finish chapter 37 of the novelization.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why you get a whole different experience from Cabin in the Woods, the book, before you get Chris Hemsworth. That was Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
The movie, right? Okay.
Yeah, a really important part of it is that it's noted in the beginning that it was written based on the script, which suggests to me that it was written before the thing was filmed, which means he didn't have any of those performances to look at before writing the book.
Yeah.
So he kind of has to interpret everything in the absence of everything else that went into creating the movie.
The lead time into the creation of a book is such that the movie is not usually done filming when you're writing the book.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And you're working on whatever version of the script they've given you, and sometimes the movie company is very assiduous about making sure you're kept up to date, and sometimes you're getting whatever version happened to be current when you signed the contract.
You're getting like version 12 when they're
Yes,
on version 17.
Exactly. You only have the purple pages. You don't have the deep chartreuse pages.
Yeah.
And that affects the novel. My favorite is when they tell you they've changed the ending and you have to fix it in the novelization, but they won't actually tell you what's in the scene. But somehow you have to magically make it happen.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
That hasn't happened to me, but it has happened to other people.
Oh
the only time that's happened to me, they actually told me what the ending was. That was for Darkness Falls.
Oh, okay.
Which was a horror movie, so it actually is appropriate.
So then it worked out. So thankfully, that once. So Toni Ann, still going in reverse alphabetical order. Toni Ann, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm not used
Before
to.
Toni Ann goes, I just have to jump in to say I'm really sorry, but I have to jet.
Yes, you got to go.
But thank you very much.
That was a
Have
beautiful
fun.
reading,
I'll see.
Mike. Thank you.
It was wonderful.
I don't know about that.
Said the reading was wonderful. We didn't say the book was wonderful.
Yeah.
So I am going to read Plan 9 from Outer Space by Matthew
Yes!
Gould. I have never seen the movie, and I never read the book. But Gary tagged me and said, do you want to read a thing? And I said, well, does this one count? And he's like, yeah, it's got zombies. And I was like, sure. And then I read the prologue, and it was bananas. And so I'm going to read that all for you, and I hope that you enjoy it.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Are you all right, Joe? Are you?
Yeah, Joe, breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth.
We are going to have to do a live action dramatic reading of Plan 9 at some point.
Well, it's on the Kindle Unlimited. We're doing a free trial, and this was one of the things that was on it. And I said, well, why not?
Bonkers.
So there's a quote from Marco Polo, which starts it off. I did not tell half of what I saw, for I knew I would not be believed. On his deathbed, apparently in 1324.
And it's probably something Ed Wood probably also said.
Probably. So, Jeff Trent was spellbound. This wasn't holy. It wasn't divine. Jeff Trent never thought that men could become gods. But now he wasn't so sure, because he knew for a fact, he had seen for a fact with his own eyes, that men could become devils. Born of alien entities or hell, men, just like him, could become monsters. Prologue. The Serpents of Men. There was music then, somewhere beyond his understanding. It was somber, emotional, yet it was filled with such loss and pain, sorrow and nothingness. It was beautiful, though, truly a gift of song, but one that spoke of death. Yes, there was music then, and tears. It was the same nightmare night after night. Damp, worm-infested Louisiana earth packed into his nostrils as he went down hard, skidding upon the earth with a violent scrape against his aged and loosened flesh. The rank air robbed from his lungs upon contact. Everywhere he looked there were gravestones, reliquies of the dead and forgotten, of a place that he would soon call home. A derelict world floating in the darkness, lost in the endless echoes and eons, like embers in the starlight. The cemetery, a graveyard of sin and despair, was a small piece of dying and forgotten past. Everything leaned in a saddened, weary way, as if with the burden of failure. Its shadow-filled mausoleums, those headstones of all sizes and shapes, were well on their way to dust, crumbling and ignored in the centuries past. The etched names of the equally forgotten and ignored were so worn by weather and time that no one could even make out any of the who or whens. No remnants but for the haunted memories of the bones within that embalming fluid-drenched earth. With the decay, nothing remained in this world of bone and blue grass. Nothing but the smell, a world that reeked of death. After all, he thought, his eyes filling with malice, this was the nightmare. And its past, the legends and lore and myths sang and bellowed even louder than the rhythm and blues of Bourbon Street, a world where the devils of existence had seen far too many hellish nights in the decades past, in the steel shadows of the tree line and structures. And there was no way that this man could have ever imagined that his mind's creation within sleep could have ever become a tribute to those legends of nightmare, that it would carry even further into those far reaches of existence and memory than when the crickets rubbed their legs together in song on that long, forgotten earth. There was no way to know that he was creating death within his subconscious. Hundreds of hurricanes and their dark, oppressing clouds had long since spilled out their bellies. Their moans of rage and fury had long since ended life at home. Their unstoppable force, the weathered woman scorned, had flooded its lands and decimated the earth. How many times had Mother Nature opened her jaws and howled? That's in capital letters, by the way. Since this nightmare creation. How many nightmares had been unpleasantly dreamed? Those storms and hurricanes of Louisiana had covered and uncovered. They had sung and screamed, whistled and roared. For centuries they had destroyed. And then, like those unpleasant nights of terror, the cold sweats, all the lives lost, all the structures ravaged and laid to ruin, all of it, it just all faded from memory. It just faded away, buried where it belonged. Like the old man who was once more staggering upright to find his sure footing, expelling the earth from his nostrils with a mighty choking heave, they were all just memories of the past now. Memories, losses, except to all those poor sad bastards who remained, who remembered. Hope was a fairy tale in places like that. Sure, college co-eds with their tight bodies and short skirts could still drop their tops for a length of colorful beads. I'll drink some black-labeled rum to that. Here's one for poor judgment. The combination of liquor and the idea of freedom from inhibitions going hand in hand. The freedom away from the real world was intoxicating. The realization of bad judgment was always reserved for the long trip home, no matter if home was found in the state or not. Yes, that was New Orleans, the old timer remembered from his youth, the one that caught up to him within nightmare, born of jazz music, plantations and bayous, delicacies of the palate, born of superstitious witch doctors and voodoo priestesses, all practitioners of the dead and buried, ideals born of darkness and light, born of hoodoo. But here, in the echoes and eons of the broken psyche, of unknown life and dreams, here in this world the dead could walk. Could is also in all capital letters. Here it wasn't supernatural. No, here it was something far different. Here it was simply called truth. The elderly soul may have found himself dreamed up in Louisiana. He may have even once wished upon those starlit heavens above Bourbon Street in the French Quarter. But in the darkness of his subconscious, it was a tribute to hell. The graveyard was empty, not a body or soul in sight. It was a dead world, an alien world. Lightning strikes scorched the mausoleum walls and crooked trees. Sparks showered down, cascading over the handprints of lifeblood and death. A war had broken out against the devils in the boneyard, and from the look of things, all souls were lost. The old man was in a coffin, and it required one more soul to the call. Screams! That's in all capital letters and an exclamation mark, so I hope I did that justice. His eyes were wild and wide with a choking fear. Disoriented and alone, he roamed through the rows of stone monuments, a hand unsteady and aimed defensively into every abyss of darkness and shadow. A sheen of sweat made him glisten in every rain of fire and spark that the nightmare grave, as its mortar and stone, wood and earth groaned out against the storm in a death rattle. Death. Yes, it was coming. He could hear it in the laughter. A sickening laughter as the man suddenly found himself upon the earth, intestines being lifted from his belly, splayed open, a horrid, hot stench, tickling gag reflex, and stinging at the watery eyes of the onlookers. Oh yes, there were others there now, many others. Their faces painted in death masks, grins diabolical, sweat dripping from their bodies. A single chant filling the cemetery bayou, a single song. The intestines were being coiled around a branch, still green and full of life. The man's eyes, like his lifted guts, were then cooking over a fire, the steel pan sizzling with the orbs. Broken yolk. It was a terrible sight as the old man's entrails were finished high above his outstretched form. But the worst part? The worst part was that he was still alive while they did so. In the nightmare, he was buried alive in the earth for days, maybe even weeks, quite possibly months, as maggots and worms, bile and vomit shared his earthbound crypt. And then he was resurrected like Lazarus. He rose not by his own accord, but by a noose and chain. He was resurrected like the dead, only to see saucers, silver vessels from beyond the stars hovering above him, glinting in the moon-minted darkness of storm and pain. And so he screamed. He screamed until his tongue was discarded elsewhere in the dirt, next to a pair of decapitated chicken carcasses. Their hearts removed and palmed in a hoodoo priestess's clawed hands. Oh my god, I killed Joe. Sorry. Her fingernails...
Oh my god.
Her fingernails... rotted and yellowed, digging into the still beating muscles of discarded life as she straddled him. She was the one who took his guts and now held his heart. She was the laughter and the music and the darkness, and he was an insect caught in the web. The hoodoo priestess, whose face was otherworldly, an alien visage, emotionless and all-consuming, was holding a dirty and cracked spider webbing across its surface hand mirror high above the old man. She did this so that he may better understand his suffering. It worked. The old man screamed, the tendons in his neck, those steel cables of muscle and tissue, snapped taut and pulsed with every beat of his adrenaline-laced heart. Like machine pistons, they came to life as the others within the graveyard spat on him, as they cast rock and stone, a vicious hate spewing from their mouths, forked tongues hissing with malice and contempt. His already broken and ravaged body convulsed against the verbal assault to his soul. A verbal assault which poked, prodded, and stabbed over and over again and again, a searing pain like a torrent of acid flowing through his veins, a red river summer. He would have screamed, cried out against the otherworldly and undead if only his tongue had still been in his mouth and not discarded away. So very far away. But wait! No, there were screams, gasps. No, not his own screams, nor those of the alien-looking priestess. No, not his own cries. There was something else. A grip like an unseen force tightening around his arm. Delicate fingers with the strength and power of 10 mortal men straining to... No, he thought, the word begging to be wrong. False. No, not you. Please, Lord Almighty, not you. That's when he saw her. My love? No sound, just the utterance of humanity. His wife was with him, in the black then, dressed in the tribute of death, a mortician's flag of color. Her features were hard, as otherworldly as the saucer-shaped crafts high above her face, a smooth white death mask, like some hellish vampire ghoul. Her fingers were tight around his forearm, a crushing force from such a tiny, thin little thing. A beautiful creature. Her mouth, capped by ruby lips, were forming words. No sound. There was never a sound, just the expression of words. Morse code without the beep dash bippity beep. He strained to understand, his own blood-covered mouth mimicking the shapes of the ruby red maid. Heap me? No. Help me, he asked without a voice. Yet her face was stone. Those eyes held no emotion, no nothing. They were just tiny black pinholes fixed in space. Help me? He was pleading now, desperately trying to understand what she was mouthing. There was still no sound, but the tears cutting jaggedly edged swats through the gore upon his face spoke volumes. Help me? She nodded then suddenly, her eyes dead, no emotion, no nothing, not until pain. She said pain. His tongue was back in his mouth. The alien priestess was lifted into those metallic creations hovering within the starlight. The walking dead were digging themselves back into the rotten decay. Yes, his tongue was back in his mouth. His voice a buckshot against the senses, all that madness. His voice crying out for the woman he loved. Oh yes, he was crying out against a reply found within the thunder. My chest! I'm in pain! Ugh. The old man screamed himself awake, drenched in sweat, a strain on his heart waiting to beat its last beat. That final mean beat, a weak, tired beat, an exhausted one. The old man screamed himself awake only to notice that the hand of his wife was still tight around his forearm. It wasn't a dream. It was happening. Her fingernails had, all at once, dug into his age-spotted flesh that was actually lingering under those fingernails now. The nightmare reality made reality. Her wedding band and engagement ring loose and crooked like those nightmare trees upon her bulbous knuckle protruding finger. Her eyes were open still. Her other hand, like ice, had frozen in place, clutching her chest, pulling at the fabric of her nightgown. Like ice, baby? Ice, baby. No, sorry. Wrong panel. Like ice, baby? Ice, my love? Cold fingers. His eyes narrowed, like death's embrace. His breath caught. Cold fingers. Oh yes, it was the same nightmare every night. Only this wasn't a nightmare. Oh no. This was something far worse. End scene.
I have no words.
That was just the prologue.
That was the prologue.
Was that, like, I was getting bits of Plan 9 from outer space.
This was actually published in 2016. It was done by a guy named Matthew Ewald, who also did filmed a remake of the movie.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's on the Kindle. It says 4%, page 17 of 320. So there's still a lot more.
My favorite. Sorry, go ahead.
I was surprised when I saw copyright 2016. I was like, oh, what's this? So I thought it was interesting.
What I especially love is he refers to them as saucer-shaped ships, when in the original movie, the script called them cigar-shaped ships, but they were actually saucer-shaped.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much that Ed Wood's film of in a nutshell right there.
That is nutso. I did not know that the guy had refilmed it. There's something about this movie.
That's what
Toni
the internet just told me just now.
Yeah. So if we do this for charity next year at Dragon Con, or if we do a movie night, I'm definitely hooked. Because that was bananas.
Yeah.
It is. Wait till you see it.
Yeah.
So, all right. I believe now in reverse alphabetical order, it is time for Keith.
Before I do mine, I want to give an honorable mention to a horror movie novelization that I could not find my copy of, and which I can't find online anywhere either. There's no ebook of it. But it is the best horror movie novelization ever. It was written by David Bergantino in 1994. It was his novelization of Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Now, if you will recall, Wes Craven's New Nightmare was about making a movie about Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
So it was a very meta movie where Freddy crosses into the real world and attacks this movie being made about him. The novelization took this one step further. The novelization was about a guy named David Bergantino who was hired to write a novelization of this movie, and he himself also like gets attacked by Freddy. It was brilliant. I can't find my damn copy of it.
Oh my gosh!
But that needed to get honorable mention. But instead, I am going to continue with tradition and read one of my novelizations. In this case, Resident Evil Extinction. Now, this is the third of the Resident Evil movies. I novelized the first two. The first movie ended. I'm sorry, the second movie ended with Raccoon City being nuked, and it's on an island, so it was, kept isolated from the rest of the world, which should have solved the problem, and everything was fine. The third movie opens with after the zombie apocalypse has happened, with very little explanation. The Constantine films very generously told me, sure, go ahead and explain how we got from the end of Apocalypse to the beginning of Extinction, which also gave me the opportunity to actually provide the actual ending for the second movie, because Resident Evil Apocalypse was one of those ones where they changed the ending and didn't tell me. I did not find this out until I saw the movie in the theater and went, that's not what I wrote. So I got to redo the ending, in here, and also provide that. So the first half or so of this book is alternating before and after chapters. Before is stuff that happened before the movie leading up to it, and the after is during the movie itself. And then the second half of the book is just what happened in the movie. So this is chapter 11, which is one of the before chapters. And at this point, the zombie outbreak has started to happen. And people are trying and failing to get it under control. It looks different. Tom Hoyt, the Umbrella Corporation's chief liaison to the federal government, looked over at Dr. Emily Love. They were sitting in the lobby of the White House, a place Hoyt had been several dozen times before. However, it was Love's first trip. They were supposed to be meeting with the president, as well as several key members of his staff, to discuss the T-virus issue. Hoyt hadn't wanted Love to be with him for this meeting. It was going to be difficult enough to calm the president on his own. But this deranged old woman would probably undermine his every attempt at placation. However, he'd been overridden. For starters, the White House had made it abundantly clear that someone from Umbrella's science division needed to be president. Chairman Wesker himself had agreed to this stipulation, and Hoyt wasn't stupid enough to countermand Wesker. Besides which, Love was the company's leading expert on the virus. Well, the leading expert's still alive, anyhow. They'd been sitting in the lobby for 10 minutes. There was very little activity in the place, which was unusual. Hoyt knew that with the country in a state of emergency, a lot of government business was being done over the phone. People were being encouraged to stay in one place, after all. Hoyt had ignored Love's comment, but she kept talking anyhow. I mean, from television. It's so big on there. This massive space with columns and stuff. This just feels like a doctor's waiting room. Did you ever watch The West Wing? Since it was a direct question, Hoyt reluctantly answered. No. The guy who wrote it was a drug addict. I don't watch TV shows written by drug addicts. Love smiled, showing very expensive dentures. You must not watch any television, then. A young man came through a door. Mr. Hoyt, Dr. Love, my name is Al Cowan. I'll be taking you to the Oval. Come with me, please. Getting to her feet, Love's smile widened. Thank you very much, Mr. Cowan. Is this your first time in the White House, Dr. Love? Cowan asked as he led them through the door, then down the hallway. Yes, it is, actually. I must admit to being a bit nervous. Cowan gave the world's most insincere smile. You've got nothing to be nervous about, Dr. Love. I appreciate your encouragement, young man, but in fact, everyone in the world has a great deal to be nervous about. The fact that I'm about to talk to the President of the United States is not why I've bitten my fingernails down to the nubs, I can assure you. Hoyt sighed. At least he knew that Love was taking it seriously. Cowan brought them past a curved wall, meaning that they were nearing the Oval Office. He opened one white door and held it for them. With the greatest reluctance, Hoyt entered. The president was sitting at his desk reading a report, with the vice president, various staffers, cabinet members, and all of the Joint Chiefs, either in the chairs or on one of the 2 striped couches. Mr. President, Hoyt said, it's good to see you. Please spare me the usual glad-handing umbrella bullshit, Mr. Hoyt, the president said. Hoyt sighed. The president was obviously in one of his moods. The public never saw this side of their leader, and it was a good thing, as the man had a vicious temper. Hoyt had sat in this room with 4 different presidents, and no one had ever given him a tongue lashing quite like the current one. The chief of staff stepped in quickly. Mr. Hoyt, we asked for a meeting with all of Umbrella's experts on this virus. We were told that you had a team working on this, and we were supposed to meet with all of them. I'm sorry, but Dr. Love was all we could spare. Hoyt walked to stand between the 2 couches and the president. Love lagged behind. Love? The president snorted. You actually brought someone named Dr. Love? The doctor stepped forward. Actually, Mr. President, it's my married name. I was born Emily Johansson. Moving his gaze from Hoyt to Love, the president asked, very well then, Dr. Johansson, or Dr. Love, or Dr. Feelgood, or whatever your name is. What the fuck is happening to my country? Hoyt started. We're working to contain... I didn't ask you, Mr. Hoyt. Now, see, when I ask you, I get bullshit. The reason I wanted your team here was to get some real answers. The Secretary of Defense spoke up. I'm sure, Mr. Hoyt. Shut up, Mike, the president said. Dr. Love? Love looked nervously around the room first. I'm afraid, Mr. President, that we haven't the slightest idea how to combat this virus. We have an antivirus that works on people who are infected, and it will keep them safe for a while, but only if it's administered on time, and the number of infected people is simply too overwhelming. We've been coordinating with the CDC to distribute, but we're swimming against the tide. The president shook his head. I've already declared a state of emergency on the entire West Coast. California, Oregon, and Washington are now completely cut off from the rest of the nation. Now, can we... Sir? The chair of the Joint Chiefs interrupted. I'm sorry, sir, but I'm afraid I've got some bad news in that regard. Glowering at the man in the Navy dress uniform, the president said, Mr. Chairman, I've had more bad news in the past few months than Nixon had after Watergate. Yes, sir, I'm sure you have, sir, but the admiral hesitated, then finally said, we've had reports of outbreaks of this T-virus in Oklahoma, in Michigan, and in Baltimore. Hoyt put his head in his hands. He hadn't known about this, and he wondered if anyone at Umbrella did. He had a sinking feeling that they did and just neglected to tell him. Holding up a manila folder, the president said, Mr. Hoyt, according to this report, the virus originally developed as a wrinkle cream. Would you mind explaining to me how a wrinkle cream turns my country into the hot zone? Love raised her hand. Sir, if I may? By all means, Dr. Strangelove, the president said, waving his hand back and forth. You're supposed to be the expert. Thank you, sir. The T-virus was originally developed by Dr. Charles Ashford as a way of revitalizing dead cells. It was meant to be medicinal. Another staffer, whom Hoyt did not know, asked, have you seen the state of California lately, Dr. Love? Doesn't look all that medicinal to me. I'm aware of that, Love said in a tight voice. I wasn't part of the development team. Well, then why aren't they here? The staffer asked. Love hesitated. Hoyt stepped in. They're all dead. Most of them were killed when the reactor in Raccoon City melted down, and the president actually laughed at that. Are you still trying to sell me that bill of goods, Mr. Hoyt? He held up another manila folder. This report is from the investigation into the meltdown, an investigation that only happened because I signed an executive order, one that got half of Congress coming through this office telling me not to sign that order or they'd grind government to a halt, that the Umbrella Corporation has been such a huge help in this crisis, and a whole lot of other bullshit. See, until recently, I actually believed that about your company, Mr. Hoyt. But then I read this report, not to mention a report made by the FBI, not to mention a report made by the Secret Service, all leading me to believe that your company was actually responsible for all of this, from unleashing this virus on the country to firing a nuclear weapon on American soil. Mr. President, the Hoyt started, getting up and walking around his large wooden desk. The president wagged his finger back and forth. Don't give me that shit, Mr. Hoyt. We're past that. Love was staring at Hoyt with her eyes wide as saucers. What's he talking about, Tom? Nothing, Doctor. The president has given false information about Raccoon City. Sir, it was a meltdown of The president was now standing almost face to face with Hoyt, and there was betrayal and anger in his eyes. Umbrella had been a huge contributor to his campaign, after all. He had supported every piece of legislation that Umbrella's lobbyists had rammed through Congress. This president had been a friend to Umbrella, and Umbrella had been a friend to him. There was no betrayal quite like that of a friend. No, Mr. Hoyt, it wasn't. It was a missile, one that Umbrella owned illegally and which has a pattern of destruction that's completely different from that of a power plant meltdown. I didn't understand a lot of what was in that report, but I got the gist. Raccoon City was destroyed. Another denial was on Hoyt's lips, but he abandoned it before he could speak. The cat was out of the bag anyhow. Yes, sir. You're right. A ripple went through the room. You realize, the chief of staff said, that you've just admitted that the Umbrella Corporation committed treason. I don't recognize that, sir, Hoyt said, because I'm not a lawyer and because no charges have been filed. They will be, the chief of staff said. Rest assured, the president said tightly. I fully intend to bring your fucking company down. You've made me out to be a fool, and history's going to remember me as the person who sold the United States out to the people who nuked a city and poisoned the population. Kids will remember me as the president who got everyone killed, and I'm damned if I'm going to let you get away with that unscathed, Mr. Hoyt. Be that as it may, Mr. President, I think we have bigger problems. Right now, we're the only ones who know anything about this virus. And if you decide to engage in criminal proceedings against the corporation, that help will not be forthcoming. Oh, please. That was one of the Joint Chiefs, a bald, pale man who looked as if he was sweating. You've been so much of a help so far that this disease has made it all the way across the country. And all your best experts are dead. Exactly how much do we lose if you're not involved? He wiped his brow with his hand as he stood up. Your company, sir, is a disgrace to the United States, and I'm right with the president on this. You will be made to pay for what you... Suddenly, the general's eyes went very wide. His arm extended straight out, and he fell to the carpeted floor, his face landing right on the eagle in the presidential seal on the rug. Chaos reigned in the room. People called for doctors. Secret Service agents came running in. People shouted. Love took advantage of the chaos to pull Hoyt aside. What the hell did he mean, Tom? We nuked Raccoon City? That's crazy. How can we do that? Hoyt tried to formulate something in his head that would satisfy the doctor when he heard a strangled scream. Whirling around, he saw that the general who'd collapsed was biting the chief of staff on the ankle. Oh my God, Love said. Then she looked at one of the Secret Service agents. Quickly, you've got to quarantine this building. The agent looked befuddled. What? Hoyt realized what she meant. The T-virus has gotten loose in the White House. The general's eyes had gone milky. He had the virus, and now he was trying to bite everyone in the room. Shoot him in the head, quickly! Hoyt cried at the agent. Are you insane? The president asked. Love interrupted. Mr. President, the general has the T-virus, and he'll kill everyone in this room if somebody doesn't shoot him in the... The general leapt into the air, making a strangled noise from his dead throat, and landed right on Dr. Love, ripping into her shoulder with his teeth. People were screaming and yelling, and Hoyt felt the world tilt around him because this wasn't supposed to happen. Sure, there was what happened in Raccoon, though Hoyt wasn't present for it, and he knew there were problems in California, but it shouldn't have affected him. He was just doing his job, and he was 3,000 miles from where this mess started. The report of a gunshot ripped through the chaos, silencing the room. The general fell forward on top of Love, who started screaming again. Lowering the weapon, the muzzle still smoking, the Secret Service agent cried out, Crash the building! Crash it! Hoyt knew that meant they would seal the building so no one could get in or out. But he wondered if it would do any good. The White House had been infected.
Now I gotta go see the movie again.
No, well, that scene is not in the movie.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah. That was one of the before scenes. I got to create a crap ton of new material for this. That isn't actually in the movie. Like I said, the movie starts way after this. It starts long after, the United States is basically a wasteland of zombies, and there's little pockets of resistance here and there. So I got to basically say how it got that way, which is why,
Very, very neat.
I had to do that. The other thing I got to do was there was one character, Jill Valentine, who was not in Extinction because the actress who played her was not available. They wanted to keep the character around for future movies, so they told me to come up with a side plot for her. So I got to do that too. So that was fun.
Neat.
Yeah, honestly, of all the movie novelizations I have done, that's the one I had the most fun with because I got to add so much material and do stuff like, a zombie outbreak in the White House. That was so cool.
That is nutso.
Yes.
Turned out to be really prophetic.
Yeah. Well, this came out in 2007, so it was written while George W. Bush was still president. So.
So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the American Sci-Fi Classics Track. We do these every 2 weeks. We'll do fun stuff in between. We keep the nerdiness going all year round until we get back into live action with you next fall. But in the meantime, we're going to do fun stuff like this all the time. Thank you to Michael, who had to leave early. Thank you to Keith. Thank you to Toni Ann. Toni Ann, tell people where on the interwebs you can be found.
You could find me on Twitter and probably Instagram at Jersey_Devil86. And you could also find my blog about Star Trek and a bunch of other things at thegeekydevil.com.
And Keith, should you wish to be found?
It's really easy. If you search for Keith DeCandido on the internet, I'm the only one who's going to turn up. If you go to DeCandido.net, you will find my terrible website, which is a convenient link dump to all the places that I hang out on the interwebs. It links to there's my Facebook page. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, to my Wikipedia page, to my articles for Tor.com, to ordering links for my books, all sorts of stuff. So feel free to check that out. And I have lots of books out that you should buy, like all of them, because they're awesome, not just that one.
And there's a link to your Patreon too.
Yes, and also to my YouTube channel, which is where I've been reading some of my all of my short fiction on Crad COVID readings. And yes, there's also my Patreon where you can give me money and I give you stuff.
See,
I give you cat pictures and I give you writing. In exchange,
a fair trade. It's a fair trade. We here is where you can find. Whoops! Where's the thing?
You lost the thing.
There's the thing. Everybody, if you're watching us on Facebook right now, you're already there. You're there already. You're right there. Look at that thing. You're already right there. If you're not, if you're watching us on the YouTubes or the Twitches or whatever the heck, then join us there, because the Classic Track Clubhouse is a place where we don't talk about politics or anything but nerdiness and all related nerdy things. And we like to think of it as an oasis, if you will, and not the kind where it's two British brothers who hate each other. Let's see. Also, on the YouTubes, right there is where you can subscribe to us. And just like Keith with his Crad COVID readings, which you should also subscribe to, we have a year's worth of panels, much like this one, that you can watch and spend time away from work and productive things during. So in 2 weeks, we are going to be back here, and we've decided to extend spooky season into November, because in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about a Halloween classic called A Hocus Pocus. And that amok, we're going amok in 2 weeks. So Keith, Michael, Toni Ann, everybody in the chat, everybody watching, we love you. Stay safe. We will see you very, very soon. On behalf of everybody, thank you.